So, I'm interviewing Professor Sinha, and so my first question for you is, where were you born, and what was it like where you grew up?
So I was born in Calcutta, India,
Mm-hmm.
and what was it like? Well, it was a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
a very long time ago, and well, everything was very different then. India was very different. The world was very different. Um, Growing up, I think it was actually a very nice way to grow up in the sense that I grew up in a kind of a reasonably prosperous, wealthy family, so I didn't have to deal with all the poverty. Of course, one dealt with it outside. You saw it all around you, and it affected me, and it always made one feel guilty for enjoying, being relatively well off in that kind of society. But on the other hand, I was actually born while the British still ruled India.
Oh, wow.
And I was 7 years old when they left, and I remember all the parades and the people waving the flags and the celebrations of the Indian independence when the British left.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up in a society where India was just a newly independent country, and actually I went to a Catholic school.
Okay.
Because that was, in that time, the best schools were run by Jesuits and missionaries and so on. And so I'm not a Catholic. I didn't become a Catholic myself, but they certainly did their best to try to convert you. And but anyway, there were lots of good memories, and it was actually. There was no internet, there were no iPhones, no iPads, no computers.
Mm-hmm.
I remember if I wanted to listen to foreign radio programs, having to scrunch up next to the radio, and there was no TV. But we had a lot of games that we played ourselves as children, and I used to read. We read a lot more than you kids read today.
Sad.
We read a lot of books, and I think and we played more imaginative games, I think, as children than kids do now, because they have everything on iPads and phones and TV.
Right. Okay. What were your parents like?
My parents were very. They were actually not very Orthodox Indian. My father had been educated in Oxford, and my mother was a sort of very unique sort of person. She decided that she was going to have to do something as a member of the sort of rather well-off society to help people. So she started an orphanage for women who had been thrown out from their homes because the people had kicked them out for having the wrong kind of boyfriend, or somebody made them pregnant, or they were rescued from brothels and things like that. And so these women had nowhere to go. Sometimes they had young children, so she started a home for them. And they started a society of many ladies in Calcutta got together and started this what's called an All Bengal Women's Union. And it grew into a fantastic thing. Now it still exists. It's got its own funding, and it has about 300 or 400 women and children who live there. And so she was completely transformative in the way she changed society. She was actually, you probably heard of Mother Teresa. She was a friend of hers. They used to work together. And so my mother was not part of her organization, but she had her own parallel thing, and she was quite a remarkable woman. She lived to 95.
Oh, wow. That's really, that's really amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what were you interested in as a kid?
What was I interested in? You mean before I got interested in girls, or after?
Yeah, probably before.
I think I was interested in science, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
I remember finding books in my parents' library about science,
Mhm.
and they showed pictures of planets and stars and galaxies, and I think that just fascinated me. So I used to go out, in India in those days, in Calcutta, the sky was quite clear, and you could see all the
Oh.
constellations and galaxies late at night. And I used to watch them, and I used to, was very interested in science fiction, of course, because I used to dream of traveling to stars and so. But physics and mathematics always interested and fascinated me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So from an early age, actually. Yeah.
That's very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
So.
So I always knew that I wanted to be a scientist.
Right. Okay, that's really good.
I was kind of a nerdy little kid,
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you said that your parents were not Orthodox Indian, but did you grow up, were they traditional as in the Indian ways?
No.
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 Okay.
In fact, my father was more British than he was Indian, because he'd been he went to school in England.
Right.
And he went to college in England.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was actually a very famous person. He was in the House of Lords. He was made the first Indian who became a peer. Was made a lord.
Oh.
And he came back and he became governor of one of the states and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a very famous guy, and he brought his children up to be very British.
Okay, I see. And did you like that? Did you think that was...
No, I always felt a little bit out of place, because I tried to fit in and be more Indian, and they used to tease me because I didn't speak Bengali very well, and but gradually that went away, and my mother was much more she was much more part of the Indian culture and all that. So from her side and from my grandmother, I got my Indian culture, so to speak.
Okay, that's cool. When you got into high school, I know you said you're interested in science at an early age, but what about in high school? What did you have like a little veering off, or did you still care about math and science and all that?
In high school, I always liked my physics and math classes, and I always did well.
Okay.
And trigonometry and all that stuff. I just loved it, it was great.
So you were a good student?
Well, not always. Sometimes I used to goof off.
Okay.
And I remember I had a high school physics teacher who always thought I was great, but then he noticed that my grades were falling off, so he took me aside one day and said, "Sinner," he said, "you are gradually going down, down, down." I still remember his words still echo in my ears, gradually going down.
Aw. Okay. All right. What point did you know you were interested in actually teaching physics?
Oh, that I didn't know for a long time. In fact, I always wanted to do research in physics, and teaching was not something that was at the top of my list of things I wanted to do. And so, but I realized that, to be a researcher, you probably have to be at a university, and then your jobs involve teaching and so forth. And I actually enjoy teaching, but that's not the primary reason I went into academia. It was really to do research.
Okay. So did your parents have a specific career they wanted you to go into when you were younger?
Yes. My father had studied, of all things, Latin and Greek classics at Oxford. And he wanted me to study the same.
Oh, wow.
Or to become a, liberal arts or history or something like that. And then to go back, to go to Cambridge or Oxford, which I did in the end, and go back to India and join a good British company and move up as a company man.
Okay.
And that's the last thing I wanted to do.
Right. This sounds like the last thing compared to science. Okay. Well, then how did they react when they heard that you wanted to be a professor or do research?
They actually were very, very supportive.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they were very supportive.
Okay.
And they never really said, no, you can't do this. They realized from an early age that I was interested in science, and so they encouraged it when they knew that.
Okay, that's really good, because a lot of parents have a hard time doing that.
I know.
Yeah.
Especially Indian parents.
Yeah, right. That's
Right.
why I need to ask that question.
Exactly. Exactly. They were not typical Indian parents, I guess.
I see.
Yeah.
But so what aspect of being a professor do you find most rewarding?
Interacting with young people.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whether they're my graduate students or my research students, you know, it's always great to, especially to see bright young people blossom and develop, you know, and to realize that you've inspired them to some extent. And I have people still coming back, you know, to say that I was a big influence, you know, how I'd influenced them and launched them on their careers and so forth. So that's nice. I enjoy it when they when you take somebody who really is not very motivated and doesn't really know what they want to do. Like I had a girl in my group, a graduate student, and she wasn't really very motivated and not very confident about herself. And then gradually she began to get confidence, and she started doing things, and now she's a very good scientist, and she is really motivated, and it's just amazing to see that coming out, you know.
Okay, that sounds really, really good.
Yeah.
All right. What was the most difficult part in your journey to becoming a professor?
The most difficult part, well, I guess, you know, when you're young, when you're struggling, so when you got your PhD and you're trying to prove yourself and make it in your career, it's the struggle to prove yourself, that, you know, you have to show other people that you can do things, that you can do research, to be accepted by the people who are really the big people in the field. And I remember when I came to the U.S., I came to the U.S. as a postdoctoral associate, and I went to my first big physics conference, the first professional side. There were like thousands of people there, and I had been reading some papers of several of the people who were going to give talks at this meeting, and I saw they were giving talks, so I decided I wanted to go. I'd been doing my own research in that area, so after the talk, so I listened to one of these guys, and he gave a talk. He was from Canada, actually, but he was a big shot in theoretical physics, and I went up to him afterwards, and I introduced myself and said I would like to discuss your work, because I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing. And he just looked at me like, you know, like he looked through me, you know. Who is this guy? He didn't know me for Adam. And all the time I was talking to him, I could see him looking around desperately trying to get away, you know, and saying hi to people, not listening to a word I was saying, and saying, well, very good, you know, and he shook my hand and walked off and said, thank you. And I was crushed. And I made at that time a kind of a promise to myself that if I ever became a famous physicist, and a young person came up to me and wanted to tell me what they were doing, I would never behave that arrogantly and tell them, you know, that they were worth nothing, you know. And I've kept to that.
That's a good learning experience, I think. That's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, okay. So, how has your role as a professor or academic changed you as a person?
I don't know about it changing me as a person. I think actually, as you get older, you begin to realize, to some extent, that you're responsible for a lot of young people, and you have to be more of a role model and so forth. So you can't just do whatever you want, you know. But has it changed me? I don't know. I think to a large extent, one of the things that I feel in a way is that, you know, you have your own family and your kids and so forth, and you have your students and and I think I've probably, you know, and I spent so much time dedicated to my research and to my students and my I think I probably neglected my own family
Mhm.
when I was when my kids were growing up. So if I had to do that again, I would probably balance it differently.
Okay.
I'd probably spend more time. I think you have to remember that one has one has a personal life, and one has to nourish that too. You
Right.
know,
Okay.
cultivate that. And I think I was just so involved in my work
Right.
and my teaching and my research that I think my family suffered actually.
Okay. Right. And my last question for you is.
Oh, good. We're at the end.
How much are you in touch with your ethnic roots right now in terms of tradition and culture?
So, you know, I married a woman. So when I went to England as a student, I met a girl from Denmark, from Europe, and so we got married. So my wife, you know, we've been married 50 years now, and my wife is Danish. She doesn't speak any Indian language, and so we don't speak anything but English at home.
Okay.
And our kids grew up speaking English, and we grew up as Americans, basically.
Okay.
Like probably you grew up, right?
Mm.
No?
No.
But I think I try to. I have many Indian friends, many Indian friends, people I grew up with, people in college, and I maintain a close contact with them. I go back. When my mother was still alive, I used to go back and visit her every 2 years in India, and I try to keep up with Indian festivals and cultures. So I try to maintain my Indian roots quite a bit, but it's hard because it's not part of my family.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
We're done.
I really appreciate this. I have to
Now
go
you can tell
transcribe
me
it now.
Now,
Oh, yeah.
turn that off.
Okay.